All right. I want to thank everyone for being here this evening as we continue to have courageous conversations. What an outstanding panel group last night to talk about health and well-being and public health overall, which we know is always tied to Dr. King's mission and goals for our community. And tonight, we have another sensational group that's here to talk to us, educate us, teach us about economic opportunity and how we could all be part of our overall economic ecosystem here for our community as well. But it gives me further great honor and pleasure as Mayor Hart to be able to introduce our moderator for this evening. Her name is none other than Joy Briscoe, who is a consummate diversity, equity, and inclusion professional, an Air Force veteran with over 15 years experience in developing culturally inclusive programming. She is currently the talent acquisition and outreach specialist for Waterloo schools, where her role is to increase the amount of staff of color, develop grow your own talent programming, while also supporting our Waterloo Career Center. She's a master of innovation and professional endeavors, and we just appreciate her for her marketing and talent skills. She's truly a jewel in our local community of Cedar Valley, and she's a Waterloo product. So without further ado, I would like to welcome our moderator this evening, Joy Briscoe.
Wow, thank you, Mayor. I really appreciate that introduction. And I am beyond excited to be here. I am beyond excited to be, as you said, a product of Waterloo, a product of the Cedar Valley. I definitely consider it an honor to be able to rep my hometown and now be back here doing work and helping youth find out what their next step is and connecting businesses with opportunities for our kids. So just, I'm truly honored and thank you. That was, so the 15 years part, I feel like I might've only been around at 25. I don't know how we make that math possible.
I think it's 1.5, not 15, it's 1.5.
Okay. We'll definitely take that. I definitely will take that. But much like what Mayor said, I am so excited to connect with these individuals that we're going to be speaking with tonight. I have had the pleasure of working with all of them in some capacity. Some of them I've been on boards with or whatever have you, but I've truly heard the things that they're a part of. And so I cannot wait, not only for myself to learn more, but for them to be able to share more with you. If you were a part of last night's conversation, again, it was very inspiring. And it was inspiring in a point of, while we know we've got some really big challenges, we've got some big rocks to push, right? But when we're pushing them together as a community, it makes those rocks a little bit lighter and it helps us get to our goal a lot quicker. And so last night was the start of a conversation when we are definitely pushing those rocks ahead together. And I'm knowing the individuals that are here today, the projects that they are supporting, the work that they are doing, some of it together, some of it within their separate organizations. Tonight is going to be another good push. And so I'm excited to be a part of that. And so without further ado, we're going to go ahead and have them introduce themselves. And I know we're all in a Brady Bunch fashion here, so I'll kind of give a call out to which order we go. And then after that, we're going to launch into a series of questions. So very excited about this. So first, I'd like to introduce or have my mentor actually introduce himself, the illustrious Robert Smith.
Oh, thank you very much, Joy. It's a pleasure this evening to be here. I'm Robert Smith, the executive director of the University of Northern Iowa Center for Urban Education. I've been very fortunate and blessed to be at the university for over 30 years and have served on a number of boards and throughout the community. And one of my passions has always been economics in terms of financial literacy and teaching and doing what I can to help best with that. So I look forward to having good conversation this evening. Thank you for inviting me.
Alrighty, thank you, Robert. And now I'll go to another game changer. Ms. Cary Darrah, would you mind introducing yourself?
Sure, thank you, Joy. I'm Cary Darrah with Grow Cedar Valley, and as you may know, we are the Regional Economic and Community Development Organization. So tonight's conversation is especially important, and I'm really anxious to have more comments and conversation and learn more and help wherever we can. But I've worked with all of you on different projects at one time or another. So this will be a really good evening, and I really appreciate being invited. Thank you, Joy.
Thank you, Cary. Appreciate that. And now I love some of the endeavors that I've heard that Stacey's doing over in finance. And I'm not going to steal your thunder, Stacey, but I'm just excited the way that you reach out about getting more people involved in the conversation behind economics. So could you go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Thanks. Thank you, Joy. And thanks for allowing me to be here tonight. And good conversations. And I'm glad we're having this tonight to continue. So I have the pleasure of being president and CEO of Community Bank and Trust. We're a local bank in downtown Waterloo. And then we have a branch in Kimball and a branch in Cedar Falls as well. And we're part of a bigger company now out of Moline, Illinois. And so what I am interested in talking tonight and just getting the message out as we continue these conversations is just how do we continue to communicate with one another and grow and build our community. And so excited about that this evening. I'm born and raised in Waterloo. And so I'm also a hometown girl here. And so just want to, this is where I choose to stay and live, and I want to retire here. So anything we can do to make this a better community, that's what we're all about. So thank you, Joy.
Thank you, Stacey. Appreciate that. Yes, definitely. I think I'm excited again because all of you I know for a fact are about that. And so with that, last but certainly not least, I'm one of my favorite people. She's one of the sweetest, but a definitely powerhouse in our community. ReShonda Young, would you mind introducing yourself?
Yeah, hi. My name is ReShonda Young, and Joy, thank you so much for the invitation to be here tonight. I have been a small business owner in the community for a little over 20 years. I currently work as the program director facilitator for the Black Business Entrepreneurship Accelerator program that is run under the 24/7 Black organization. I also sit on a lot of boards, both locally and nationally. And the boards nationally are all focused on small businesses and how we can affect change for small business owners across the United States.
All righty. Thank you, ReShonda. And again, we last night I felt like we had the best to have the conversation around health and wellness. And tonight I feel the same way about economic inclusion and creating economic opportunities for us all. I feel like we have some of the best minds in our city. And because it's my city or city that I'm from, when I say that, I'm going to say in the nation probably, right? I'm not going to be that modest and say that truly some of the innovation that we've seen come out of our community is definitely nationwide noteworthy. And so with that being said, let's go ahead and get into our first question here. Recognizing the many challenges to promoting economic prosperity with the arrival of COVID-19, how can we promote and sustain economic growth while focusing on equity? And I will start with, we'll go in the kind of similar order that we introduce ourselves in, but we'll switch it up here in a minute. But we'll start with you, Robert, with everything going on with COVID, from a person that is a leader in an organization, but also a leader in the community. What are some things that we can do, even with the challenges of COVID, that still promote economic vitality, but focuses on equity as well?
I mean, that's a great question. I think one of the things we can do is to continue to have good dialogue, communication. I think that's critical. And I know there are a number of things we've been doing. For example, Community Bank and Trust with Stacey, we've had the bank to come in and do a presentation with UniQ. To better help people understand how the banking works. Many times, I think we forget, we just assume everybody understands the process. How, for example, banks work. How, for example, economic development really works. I'm amazed of how many people just don't understand what that process is. They've never been in that space. So I think one of the things is to really continue to try to keep open communication, be there to answer questions, to help people feel comfortable in this particular space of economic development, particularly in the Black community. This is a small pool in terms of how particularly the Black community has really, in some cases, been left out, but in most cases have never had the exposure or the experience. So I'm just glad to see that a lot of these communication is going on within the community, with the business community, and hope that we continue to do that.
Okay, I'll go to Cary next, definitely, because this is totally your wheelhouse. Yeah.
Well, and it's I don't know that it's my wheelhouse because we're so passionate about it, but I can always learn more. So I appreciate any additional information. But I'll kind of tag on what Robert was saying about and you, Joy, about we're going through not only the pandemic, but we're going through a real time of innovation and opportunity. And so while we know that workforce, as far as a thriving economy, we know that before the pandemic, workforce was a key issue for all of our businesses. And it still is, but it's a much different, approaching it from a much different level. So we're going to need to really rejuvenate our efforts on workforce development. And I really think that we need to be far more intentional about not only realizing that opportunities may be different, the training is going to be different, but we need to get those opportunities in front of more people, in front of all people. And I think that's where what we're learning is that, and I really learned from last week, ReShonda, when you and Joy, you were talking about with Director Durham about the Minority Business Incubator or Accelerator, and now it's the Black Business Accelerator Program, that what you thought you were doing was meeting these businesses where they were and then helping them. And what you realized quickly was that we were not meeting them anywhere close where they were. And so I think kind of expanding on what Stacey and Robert was saying about the conversation, we need to understand that we can't make assumptions about what people need, about what workforce needs, what employers need. We need to be really open-minded and intentional about learning what we need to do to get more people into the working, more people employed. The quality of life for a workforce is much better. Their contributions, their ability to be able to feel the reward of being part of an employee group is vitally important, not only for our residents, but for our businesses. So I'm excited about this conversation because I think we can really build on this, and there's a lot of stepping stones that can occur.
I so agree. That was a really impactful conversation we had last week. And the irony is here, ReShonda and I we're in the community. And so we felt like we had an idea of what needed to happen, and we still weren't missing the mark. We still needed to do some discovery with our businesses, right? And so that's a great point, Cary. And since I mentioned you, ReShonda, what are some things how do you envision us as a community promoting economic prosperity, even with COVID around, while focusing on equity and equality?
Sure. So again, that is a really good question. I believe the first thing is education, which I think 24/7 Black is doing a really great job of with the financial literacy series that have been going on. There have to just be really open conversations around diversity, and not making it something taboo, making sure that we're really focusing on the things that we have in common instead of all these things that are different. Not to say that we just forget about our differences, that's not the answer, but really focusing on those commonalities that we do have. And so as I think about just really promoting, just prosperity, we have to know where the Black businesses are, where the Asian businesses are, the Hispanic businesses. We have such a diverse community. And I think all of us at times are really guilty of really just getting stuck in where we're at instead of reaching out. So, just some intentional things that we can do. One of the things that I've challenged some of the people around me to do is, we have really great Bosnian stores and bakeries. Visit them, support them. We have really great Asian markets. Go visit, support, learn something different, experience new cultures. And I think that, by doing that, we're also promoting economic growth within all of our communities within Waterloo. So we're spending our dollars in just the places that we don't traditionally spend them.
Love that. I love that, ReShonda. That's a great point because we do have, and all of us, 'cause sometimes we operate in our own little bubble and we don't get out of our bubble. And getting out of your bubble not only lends itself to making your life more richer, more fulfilled, but you're also, like you said, if you're spending your resources there, then you're actually investing in other cultures. So I love that point. How about you, Stacey? What are some things that you envision us doing for economic prosperity as a region?
Yeah, and I really want to focus on what ReShonda said, because that's a lot of similar things of what I was going to say as well, because there are businesses in town due to COVID-19 that are hurting, and local businesses that have really been impacted, and maybe some that are worried about their future if things don't open up, and lots of restaurants and grocery stores and the things that you mentioned, ReShonda. And so I think that's the key right now. If we want to focus on for this first question on the COVID-19 piece is how do we lift up the people in our community that we know are being affected the most? And I was listening to a talk show on Martin Luther King Day, and I think it was out of New York, but we could do it here. And they were talking about having special days and saying, this is the day to visit your African-American businesses, and here's the list of them, and go shop there today and tomorrow. And then the next day it's like Asian or whatever, and Bosnian and so forth. But they were really focusing on pockets in their community and telling the community, go out and visit these businesses today, and spend some money today. And so I think if there's something maybe we can do to build on that, ReShonda, is say that, and get the lists out, and, use Cary's team to get that done, and just target, and the businesses will sign up. We're not, if they don't want to, that's fine, but I can't imagine anyone not wanting to do that. But then we all go and spend our money, as you said, ReShonda, we spend our money here, and we do, Joy, get into our own little pockets, because you drive. Well, my husband doesn't, he switches it up, but I drive the same way to work every day and the same way home every day. And so if you have to stop for something, you kind of get in your own rut. And so we do need to think outside, because it does enhance us as well as our community. So that's what I wanted to add to that.
I love that. That's so true. And I think we're all guilty of that at times. If you've had a hard day at work, sometimes that direct route is the quickest way home. But sometimes just thinking about how, as community members, we can really work to impact, and maybe taking that extra 5 minutes to go into somewhere new, or that extra 10 minutes, how that can really give life to a business, especially during COVID, I would have to say. So I think you guys gave some great answers there. So thinking about from a business perspective, we talked about from a region, like what are some things as a community we can do, but all of you are in positions where you either have ran businesses or led an organization, or you currently do. So what are some examples of policies that we can do that help reduce inequality without slowing down growth and economic efficiency? Because as a business leader, when you are head of an organization, you have to worry about that, right? Like, you got to worry about budgets, you got to worry about, but what are some things as policy that you can do that really address inequality, but still promote economic growth and equity? Let's see, let's start. Stacey, I'll start with you since you were last time. Go ahead.
Okay, well, this is similar to what 24/7 is doing, because I think they're right on track here. But again, because I'm in banking, I read banking articles. That's my life. And so I was reading about Barclays Bank, and what they're doing is similar to what 24/7 is, but they're talking about, they're doing a tech accelerator program, and they had applications, and the gal who was setting this up was only hoping for, I think she said 25 applications, and she received 178. And but here's the key of the application for this accelerator program, this tech accelerator. It had to be someone who wanted to start a business. They were focusing on business startups and in the tech world. But we could do something different here in the community. But the caveat, which I found very interesting, was one person, one of the founders or one of the board of directors had to be Black. And so they couldn't even apply unless that was a piece of that. And it's like, you know what, I know 24/7 is doing that a little bit. But if we could, and then they said their goal, here's the thing, and ReShonda talked about it, their goal was to develop that business from the very, very early stage. And because we kind of all assume maybe they've gone and they're at step C, D, or E, and really they're only at step where they have the idea and that's it. And it's a great idea, but they haven't gone to B or C or D, and we're thinking they have. And so that's what the this bank talked about, was to developing the businesses in the early stages at the startup in their journey, the very startup, and getting it going from there. And so while that's not something we're doing here in our community yet, necessarily, although 24/7, I was just thinking, is there a way we could do something like a tech accelerator, because we have the technology here, and we have so many good things here that we could start with, and we have talent here. Can we do something and get that going? So that was my one thing of what could we do to implement some policies that way.
Stacey, I absolutely love that. And I actually have on, for a youth thing that I do, that definitely for the kids that we work with at the Career Center, we have a whole multimedia department. And I challenged the kids just for fun recently to build a virtual classroom, because VR is popular, and they did it. They actually text me a video, and they did it in like a day. Their minds are so sharp that in a day they had this mock-up of a teacher teaching in what was a virtual classroom. So I again, I know we have the talent and to do something like that here. And so since Stacey mentioned you, ReShonda, what are some things that you think, like you're heading up our program, and then I know you're launching the Bank of Shabazz too, but aside from that, you also ran and got franchised Popcorn Heaven. And so as a business owner, what were some things policies that maybe you utilized or wanted to utilize to combat inequity?
So what's always really important to me is setting a culture from the very beginning. And that culture, it comes from the top, but it has to infiltrate through your organization. And they have to see that you're living in that culture. And so whether it was running my dad's businesses or running my own, it was always about the culture. It was about how you treat everyone. I mean, that, even though that may not seem like the thing that you would talk about in a meeting, for your leaders, but that was the thing we talked about, is how we treat one another, not just our customers, but also our, one another internally. Because what we find is whether it is a primarily white organization that may just have one or two blacks, or a primarily black organization that just has one or two whites, we can oftentimes exclude those people who are different than the group. And so really just trying to make sure that everyone felt included, not shying away from the questions, the subjects, but really setting that culture that we treat each other well, not just outside, but inside. Because a lot of times within companies, you'll get someone who is of a diverse background that is hired, but they feel so uncomfortable because of the way that people treat them once they're there, that they don't stick around very long. And so it has to be a culture that's set from the top, but infiltrated down and really focused on.
I love that. I love that. So I think all of you know talent acquisition and HR stuff. That's my world. And so I would always preach to orgs that let's try to keep your good employees. Like, yes, I'll recruit some, but the ones that you got that are good, let's talk to them about what we need to do for them to stay. It's easier to keep great employees if you invest in them a little bit than to bring somebody new in. Sometimes you need fresh blood, but in general, to bring somebody new in, train them, get them ready. I mean, let's invest a little bit in our retention piece. And so thinking about that, Cary, what are some things as Grow Cedar Valley that you think are some policies or some things that you've done?
Well, sure. A specific policy is one that the City of Waterloo, an example of one is one the City of Waterloo passed, about 18 months ago, and the fair hiring practices, some call Bay in the Box. Our position from Grow Cedar Valley was that we fundamentally supported the concept, but our hope was that it would be a statewide initiative as opposed to just city by city. So I talked with our local legislators, and there was some interest, but they really didn't see a lot of promise in that. But I think that's a good start. I think having that fair hiring practices, second chances for folks that really do deserve and can provide a good employee experience for our employers. But building on what ReShonda said too, and Joy, you were on the same call I was earlier, and maybe ReShonda, you were too, and maybe Robert, you were too, but when the presentation we had from the director for Center for Economic Inclusion from Minneapolis, and what was really telling, I thought he said when they did the questionnaire of employers, 2/3 of the employers believed they had an inclusive environment, and only 1/3 of their employees said they did. So someone isn't understanding what inclusion means or what being inclusive is like. And ReShonda, you really hit the nail on the head. And that was discussed today too, about, do you feel like you're the only one in some places? Do you feel, whatever only means, but are there times when you feel so alone wherever you are in your workplace for a variety of reasons? And building those relationships. And I really that's what I took away from today's conversation was, we first need to admit that there's work to be done, and there'll always be work to be done. So always talking and always conversing about what do you need? This is what I need. Is this realistic? Is this part of what you envision our relationship, the progress we're going to make together? So I really think that all of us have really touched on the relationship piece and the culture piece, and there are different ways you can go about it. But I think ultimately, from an employer and employee standpoint, there's a lot of reciprocal understanding that needs to go on. And I think that really needs to be prioritized.
I agree, Cary. That's so true. He was a great call earlier, and he did say that. And I was on a call, not that call, because I thought that was good. I was on a call earlier this week, and it was a diversity equity call, and that was the same thing too. The question was, how would you rate your culture? And a lot of the people that worked there were, oh, it's so good. And I was like, well, why are we here then? Like, if it's so great, why'd you guys ask me to come talk to you? And they were like, well, there's been some issues. I'm like, okay, well, if we don't name it, we can't address it. So we have to at least start by naming it and being honest with ourselves about that. And after that, we had a wonderful dialogue, but there was that moment of, well, no, everything's fine and rainbows and sunshine. And my name's Joy, so I'm a positive person, but I'm like, realistically, I wouldn't be here if that was the case. So definitely. How about you, Robert? What are some things from an organizational standpoint that you've done or you would envision companies doing?
Yeah, let me give you, I want to take you back to an experience that I got exposed to. So over 20 years ago, I got a phone call from a gentleman by the name of Joe Vick. And Joe Vick, along with Dr. Ross Christensen, who's no longer with us anymore, and a gentleman by the name of Rick Young. They had decided with other individuals that they wanted to start a bank, a community bank. And so, they invite me to lunch. I'm thinking it's something about running for office or something. I don't know. I mean, I've run for the school board, and these gentlemen had helped me and supported me doing that. And we had lunch and talk about an opportunity to be part of this bank. And they asked me would I consider being one of the directors of this bank. I mean, I've done an internship in college at a bank, but I don't know anything about running a bank. I absolutely have no idea. But anyway, long story short, I ended up becoming part of this bank and was able to sit from ground level, learning and watching and have become great friends with Joe Vick and Mr. Rick Young, and sit in that space and learned about trust and on the trust committee, and learned about how you go through the process of your businesses, and so ended up serving on that bank board for years up until the bank was sold to now Community Bank and Trust. They mentored me. See, we're talking about inclusion. See, that was inclusion. That's real inclusion. I didn't know anything about banking. They trusted me. I trusted them. I'd had a community relationship. They had a chance to watch me. See, to me, diversity and inclusion is you bring people in and you help them grow. That then, now I'm in the community, economic development, economic empowerment. I believe in it. I believe in it because they believed in me and they helped me grow. So if that's not what we're doing, if it's just kind of the surface, and so that's why I believe that if credit unions, banks had a member on their board or on advisory board, you embrace them, you help teach them. See, that's real diversity and inclusion, because they're part of the learning. I invested my money in the bank, so they did not only ask me for my advice, they helped me make money, they helped me learn how to invest. That's real inclusion. That's how you change communities. When you let people come to the table and learn, when you embrace them. Now I'm bought in. I'm not leaving Waterloo. And I think those are the types of real opportunities I think we have to provide to women and Black community members. You have to really invite them to the table. Part of understanding, you have to teach them along with, then they become your allies. But if it's just outside stuff, don't just invite me to the party, but you don't let me stay. And I think if we can get to those types of things, so to me, that's a policy. Their policy was they allowed me to be at the table. Now I'm an investor. I still own shares in Community Bank and Trust. I'm money there. I still bank there because I'm committed to that organization, because that organization was committed to me. That's real relationship. That's real relationship building.
I love that, Robert. I love being in this moment of 2021 where we're talking about even transformational inclusion, right? And maybe we should coin that, like all of us together, we can coin transformational inclusion, because that's different than what typically people think of when they think of inclusion. They think, oh, well, I invited you in. And in a meeting earlier today, I told someone that too. The invitation doesn't equal inclusion. That's not what inclusion is. And I love that you said, not only did they invite us in, they invited you in, but you learned together, you were mentored, you invested money, you made money, right? Resources. And so maybe that's something that we can even think about going further as a community for 2021. How do we create more transformational inclusion? I absolutely love that. And kind of that's along the line too of thinking of Dr. King's dream, right? Like why we're all here, what's making us really think about this. So as organizations in the last 12 months, have there been things, and I'll start with you for this one, Stacey, is there something that you've done as an organization to address barriers for marginalized populations during the last 12 months? And then if so, what challenges or has there been barriers to reaching that goal?
I'm going to talk both personally and professionally on this, because I think it's a great question. What have we done in this last 12 months? And a portion of it from me, I'll start personally, is I've grown more in this last 12 months than I ever have in my life, as far as understanding what the real issues are here in our community, because I kind of lived in my own little bubble. And it really started with reading the book, How to Be Anti-Racist. And I kind of thought, well, we're all racist, and I've been through lots of training on that. And so I kept thinking, you know what, I know we all inherently are, but I try not to be racist. And so I'm a good person. And what I realized was that's not enough. And you have to be anti-racist, and you have to raise your hand, and you have to say and speak up and get involved and say enough's enough. And here's, we need to be together and go forward. And so that's been a game changer for me, learning. And that's because of all of you. And you guys letting me, so Robert talks about being at the table. I feel like I'm now at the table. And you guys are training me and teaching me, and you're calling me out when I say the wrong things. And, I think I said hand up to some one time, or hand out, and someone's like, no, 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 I said hand out, and they said hand up, you know, and when you're helping one another. And so, you know, there's just, we feel comfortable enough that when I say wrong things, it's not necessarily what I mean, but we feel comfortable and we have a trust with one another now that we can call each other out and talk about those things. And so from a personal standpoint, it's been a huge learning experience for me. And I feel like I'm like 1/100th of the way there, and I've got so much further to go. But what that's helped me with a professional standpoint is I tell that story to our team, and we talk about that, and we talk about inclusion, and from every way. And, you know, as I was younger, I didn't have a lot of, I don't know, compassion or patience for people that were different than me, and not necessarily even color, but it was more like mental health issues, you know, or someone who maybe you'd have an anxiety attack, or someone who maybe, you know, whatever. And I would get frustrated. And, you know, what's wrong with them? And now I tell my team, you know, if she's having an anxiety attack, leave her alone, get her into a break room and tell her to go home for the day. And you know what? She'll come back tomorrow and she'll be perfectly fine. And we're going to blow that off and we're going to move on to the next day. And those are the kinds of things from an inclusion standpoint that we all have to just get used to, knowing that we all have strengths and weaknesses, and we embrace those. So we're talking as team members on our staff of how do we embrace all differences like that? Or if someone can't lift, you know, 50-pound bag of pennies, well, so what? Then and well, their job description says they're supposed to. So what? If they can't lift the 50 pounds, someone take two of you and lift it together, you know? And so we're talking about those different items that work, you know, and it's little things like that, but it makes a big difference if we all work together on that. So we're looking at our hiring practices. Here's the last thing I'll say. I don't want to take up all the time, but here's the one thing that's driven me crazy. To work at a bank, you have to be bonded, you have to be insured. And so they have to do credit checks and background checks. And so I've lost so many good applicants over the years because, you know, offered them the job. Yes, they sign the forms. We have to do the credit check and background check. And because our parameters say they didn't pass, I don't get to hire them. And so I have been really challenging our HR on who sets the parameters. You know, that's we're setting the parameters. So lower the parameters. What difference does it make if the credit score is 650 or 600? Really, what difference does it make? And so that's the changes that we've done, and particularly in this last 18 months or so, as I'm learning more, and you're allowing me and inviting me to learn more, and I'm opening up and learning. So I'll be quiet, but that's it.
No, Stacey, that's a huge one, right? Because we know historically, we've been underbanked and things of that nature, and people, and maybe marginalized populations sometimes don't have the same understanding, nor they've just, like Robert said, he always talks about that he was given an opportunity. It wasn't that he was so different or special, but and he is special, he's my mentor, but you know, just giving that opportunity. But we know a lot of people, for the majority of particularly Black people or a lot of Latinx people, and like you said, even with mental health, sometimes they aren't just giving that opportunity. So that's a huge change right there. You know, I've talked to employers before about how do you stop scaling down your talent pool, and what are things we can do to actually open it up. So I commend you for that. And so Robert, I'll come to you next about that. Like in the last 12 months, are there things that you've done about inequity? I know you have a very diverse staff over there at UniQ, and is there things that you've done in the last 12 months?
Yeah, I would say having been blessed to agree to be part of the 24/7 group. Seriously, because I think that's a space that I feel really, really good about, because I believe that if we can help people better understand the economic impact and how that matters, then I think people will be a lot more easier. It always bothers me, and people don't know how much banking background I have, having been on the bank board. I mean, I understand the language, and so, but people typically, when they see me, they don't think I know the language because, I'm just an old guy coming in, depositing some money. And then all of a sudden I start having those kind of conversations with them. What's your rate? What's your rate of return? Do you have any specials? Then they kind of step back and they kind of look like, well, and then here's the thing. And this is what I would challenge all of our business, community organizations, banks, community credit unions. They change once they know who I am. Once they know I know the language, once they know I know certain people or I know this individual, I've been here, they change. And to me, if they were just that way, period, it'd be so much better for their business. It'd be so much better. It shouldn't matter who you are and how much you know in terms of how you respond to people. If we can do a better job, Kara and Stacey and these economics, and treat people when they come into your business, treat people when they show up to your doorstep like they got $200,000 in your bank or they got $2 million net worth. If you treated everybody like that, do you realize how much better we'd be off in the community? But this community is still stacked against people who are unknown and who don't have much. Because I see it all the time because people don't know I know the language, whether it's the bank business, whether it's the economic side, whether it's a number of things. And so what I really hope, and that's part of what we're trying to do in 24/7 Black, is really start to work with Black citizens and help them understand the language and what the expectations are so that they can have a much better experience first, because many times people don't come back once they've had that bad experience. And like I always say, everybody white is not my enemy and everybody Black is not necessarily my friend. But too oftentimes, people who have bad experience never go back for the second chance and we lose them. So my thing is having worked with 24/7 Black, be part of that and trying to help better inform people. Hey, just because it doesn't work the first time, that bad experience you had is not necessarily a bad experience you'll have with the next white person you run into. You can't shut it down just because one white person gave you a bad experience. It is not fair, nor is it right that now you don't trust anybody. You lose out when you take that approach.
Definitely true. Yeah, and he actually, I've heard, he does say that to people too, so they understand all the way around. None of us are monolithic, right? Like there's good and bad in every race and whatever have you. And so having that understanding. So thank you, Robert. And ReShonda, I'll come to you next, and then Cary will wrap up that question after ReShonda. But
okay, Stacey, Robert, you guys both made such excellent points. Excellent. So I'd say with keeping with Dr. King's dreams and the marginalized groups, the thing that we've done, like I've made a whole job change over this last year to work with the Black Business Accelerator program and 24/7 Black group. And it is so important. And these are things that I've done, I guess, in the past, just helping people. But really that mentorship is huge. One-on-one, I mean, we can have group things, but one-on-one is where you really get to dive deep and get to know a person, their business. And one of the challenges that I have is finding enough people who have the time and the desire to actually mentor other people as they're coming along. And so that to me is one of the biggest challenges, is finding those mentors who can come in and speak into these business owners' lives. I mean, I love it. I love spending time with them one-on-one, but they need more than just me. They need more people saying, hey, yeah, I'd love to mentor some of these business owners. Stacey, one of the things that you brought up was the how to be an anti-racist book read, which I had also participated in. And I think one of the things that 2020 brought about that was good was the freedom to really tell stories, because the story is what is going to get people to know you and understand, because we can be so biased otherwise. And so, just being able to tell that story, and just a little story in saying that is, when we look at marginalized communities, and a lot of times people can be incredibly biased because we have our own worldview of things. And we don't look at the fact that, for myself, for example, myself, my cousins, we are the first generation to not grow up in the Jim Crow South. We are the first generations in our families to not have to go to a cotton field. We're the first generations that actually had opportunities. But what comes with that is the fact that our parents, and this is on our mom and dad sides for all of us, our parents didn't get to go to school all year long. So they couldn't go to school until it was too cold for them to go to the cotton fields, and they couldn't stay in school for longer than it was warm enough for them to be back in the cotton fields. So they may only be able to go to school from maybe October, November, late October, November, until end of March or so. And so you look at that education gap, and that was a systemic thing. And people don't look at that. I mean, people look at me and think that I had the same conversations and opportunities, and we had great conversations, always watching the news and trying to be educated, but we started so far behind because of the systemic things we went through. And so when you talk about the book read, Stacey, and I look at just the opportunities that we've had to tell stories so people can understand better why there are differences. When you have parents and grandparents who grew up in those types of environments, there was no opportunity to save and invest, and there was no education there. And one of the reasons that I got very heavy into learning investing, learning about saving, learning about stocks and bonds and mutual funds and real estate and everything, I had an experience in college where my roommate and I were both going to Wartburg West in Denver. And we were talking about how we were going to pay for our semesters there. And I said, well, I was a really good saver. So I was like, well, I'm just going to use my savings from my summer job. I'd always save enough money to last me the school year. And I said, well, how are you funding it? She said, well, my dad is going to let me cash in some of my CDs. Well, this was in the early mid 90s. And in my head, the only CDs I knew about were music CDs. And I was always trying to save my money. So I wasn't buying CDs. I'm saving my money. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I need to start buying some of these CDs. I don't really want to listen to them, but I didn't know, I didn't know it was a certificate of deposit. Thankfully, I had been afforded a scholarship with Principal Financial Group in Des Moines. And as part of that scholarship, they allowed us to have access to everyone from the president to the janitor. And so that next summer, I focused on the investment guides. I made sure that I got my work done so fast every day, they could not keep me busy, so that I could go and sit with them and they could teach me. And I would not have, at least in the financial realm, that kind of, just embarrassing ignorance happen. So those are some of the challenges and the opportunities that I see.
ReShonda, I love that you told that story. Really quick, I was with Nicole Hannah-Jones, who's also from here, last week, and she talked about the myth of like that minority groups or marginalized populations don't want to learn. And she talked about that even if you think about what most marginalized populations, particularly Black individuals, went through to get an education. Like you said, they had to wait until it was too cold outside and then figure out how to go to school. And a lot of times we built our own schools back then, right? And so if there's a paradigm shift and understanding that we do want education, we love people of color. Typically, really, a lot of us are into learning. But again, much like what Robert said, people they take for granted that just what's on the surface, because in the media, there's been these things. There was this old saying like, you want to keep something from a Black person, put it in a book. That's not true. I'm a bookworm. You know what I mean? Like, but we have to battle those negative stereotypes and really switch how we think and understand that for many marginalized populations, it was a struggle to be able to even, like you said, much like so your parents could even go to school and get an education. And so that's a different way when you look at that when it comes to educating people. And in this case, we're talking about financial education, right? Because again, if we're talking about just learning to read and write, most people at that point weren't getting economic education. So that's a great point, ReShonda. So, and Cary, we'll go to you now.
Sure. So I really could identify with Stacey. I too was on the book read, How to Be an Anti-Racist, and it was eye-opening. It was uncomfortable, and it should be, and it had to be in order for it to really sink in. So I was really grateful to be included in a similar panel as this. Stacey and I both were from that book read group. And then also on the panel for the Economic Inclusion Conference that we did together last fall. And just repeating these conversations, and there are really some real takeaways that are very consistent through all of them, honestly. But the other thing I found interesting, and you probably don't even know this, Joy, but I realized such importance in trusting relationships, not just relationships, and I'm realizing that for some, it takes longer to really build those, even when you don't know that that's what is needed. And for example, when a few months ago, I offered to help, have Grow Cedar Valley help as kind of be the vehicle to help apply for a grant for what actually is the 24/7 Black incubator. And we were grateful to do it. We knew that we had the nonprofit status to be able to do that. And it worked out, and we did. And I don't know what the outcome of the grant application was, but we were happy to do that. And I found out a few weeks later that nobody on this screen, but someone let me know that the group wasn't really sure if they should trust that you really were willing to do that and not want something else from it. And I said, absolutely not. But then I realized I needed to demonstrate maybe repeatedly that these are really important conversations, and that, building trust is really important. And so I totally get that. And it was a good experience for me. And again, I understand why not, when you don't know someone very well, or if you have a perception of the company or the industry or the organization, until you get to know really what the leadership style is and what's going on through the conversations internally, it may take some time. But so Stacey, I really agree that some of these earlier conversations have really played a key part. And then Robert, when you talk about mentorship, so what I just shared with you was personal observations, but professionally with Grow Cedar Valley, one thing that we recognized even before the pandemic and even before the social unrest and all of the injustices that were going on over the last several months, well, many years, but what the highlight really came to spring, we had wanted to put together a way for our key investors, folk who already are larger businesses and medium-sized businesses that already invest with us, and because we knew we were not attracting a diverse business owner to understand that we do have resources and we can help, and we can make connections that could helpfully grow your business. And we were not landing, just as I said earlier, we weren't meeting people where they were. Expect them to come to us. So we began this program, and most of you already know this, that with some of our medium and larger employers at their level of investment, then they also, with that, they are able to sponsor a minority, a woman, or a veteran-owned business to be a member of our organization. And so their investment with us pays for their membership, so they can have a year or two, or however long they want to pay for it, be at the table. And we have what is really rewarding for us, and this goes back to what you were saying, Robert, many of our investors that are agreeing to do that, they don't want to just pay to help these organizations be members of Grow Cedar Valley. They want to mentor them. They want to meet with them. They want to regularly understand what their obstacles are. And that, we did not expect that. We didn't do this to try to put together the mentor program. It just organically came together. And now we're just wanting everybody to do that. But so I'm just answering the question about what are some things in the last 12 months, that along with, we do have unconscious bias training for our team internally. It's not enough. We need to do more, but it's a start. But I think our bigger rock that we feel good about is that we're trying to pair, or we're successfully pairing businesses with those marginalized businesses that may not feel comfortable at the table unless somebody takes their hand and sits with them at the table. And so we feel really grateful for that.
Hey, Joy, can I give a real quick example since I'm the only male on this panel? So
Yes, you can.
I'd like to just share some real quick, and I know we're getting close to that time, but I had I've, you know, as I've gotten older, it's not much you can say that will bother me. I mean, I'm an old Southern boy from Texas, so I've heard it all. So I'm pretty tough-skinned about, you know, people saying something. And so one time I had an individual, I was in a space and I was the only Black individual in this group. And someone felt comfortable enough to ask me this question. And they said, well, why do Black people complain all the time? I mean, what, you know, the past is the past, you know, why do they keep bringing it up? And this was actually a female, white female who asked me that. Now, her line of work was like in the social work, was in the substance abuse type work that she did. And I said, you know, okay, that's a fair question. I said, but let me ask you a question. I said, so what happens when you're counseling or you're working with young women and you're working with women in your line of work, and a young woman who was young when she was molested or sexual abuse when she was young, but now she's 40 or 50 years old, and all of a sudden she brings that up to you. And she talks about, you know, give you an example about how she struggles with relationships and trust and this and that. I said, how do you advise her? And she was like, oh my God, no, I get that, I understand that, I worked that through that. I said, no, but wait a minute. But when she was sexually abused or when she went through that, she was 16 years old. That was 40 years ago. So how do you think Black people feel that for 40 years or 50 years, they went through all of that? But because you're not Black, you figured just move on. But because you're a woman, you can relate to it. I see, when you're not in those shoes, it's easier to say, move on. But like ReShonda said, my mother and my parents, they went through stuff. I can't say, just move on, Mom. Just move on that you had to pick cotton. Just move on that you was called the N-word almost every day. That's abuse. I mean, you have Black community members that are mentally abused. They're beat down. I mean, and so, you know, what we're asking people is, you know, you have to understand, you don't just get over that. We're better off because they shielded us from it. You know, we've still gone through it, but not as much. And so I think people have to be reminded that Black people, in particular in Waterloo, it's a mental, it's really mental. I've been here, that they struggle with trust, Kara, because they've been, you know, many have been abused, have been lied to, have been told everything was going to be okay. And so they're paranoid. They just look normal, but there are some really conditions that it takes work. And that's why I always call on our white community leaders. You're going to help us bridge that gap, because there are a lot of people who are abused mentally and have a trust factor that we're trying to help coach along to say, it's going to be okay. But we have, and I just want to finally say this, but I have to be careful in who I hand them off to.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it's that vetting process that, you know, I laugh with Stacey, but I trust Stacey because I've worked with her. You know, we both make mistakes. We both make it, but I never question her heart. But if I'm not sure of the heart, I'm not just going to trust putting some of these young people and people in the hands, because they can't afford that continual abuse. And then that's why we lose a lot of our young people in our communities. They get to a point where they don't even care. So they just commit crimes, they do things, not because they're bad people, it's because they're abused people.
Agree. I think the trust factor is huge, absolutely huge. And I don't even know that it's always conscious. Protective stance until things are and again, I think the demonstration has to be consistent and sincere and intentional. So I totally get that.
That was powerful, very, very powerful. We're actually at 7:30, but I want to give each of you 30 seconds initiative, or what would you like to see? What's our next step? Every meeting I've been at is, what are we going to do next? What are we going to do next? So in 30 seconds, and I know that's hard to do, whether it's you give me a sentence that describes what you think we need to do next to move economic opportunity forward. And I'll start with you this time, Cary. Okay, sorry.
No, that's fine. No, I mean, I've been taking a lot away, not only from this conversation, which is just awesome, but their conversation earlier today. And one of the other things was that this is a responsibility and accountability of the entire community. So I think just because we have a few business leaders here and we've got some key leaders from the Black community here, this has to be pretty pervasive. We see a lot of the same people speaking up and being willing to share some pretty personal and impactful stories, but this has to be across the board as community responsibility, and the accountability has to come with it. I don't even know what that looks like as far as next steps, but acknowledging it and admitting to it is a first step.
I love that, Cary. That's so true. How about you, ReShonda? You're parting your last sentence of what's next.
Yeah, so access to capital is the key thing that I think we need to really focus on. And a lot of people, as they go for business loans, home loans, go to the bank, they'll get a denial. And I really challenge the financial community, instead of just that denial and, go away, it's okay, you're denied because of this, let's work together, or I can point you in the direction of this organization that can work with you to get you approved. The credit counseling, Stacey, is awesome. I think that's absolutely wonderful, so needed. But there needs to not just be the no's from the financial community, but that access to capital comes with the education.
I love that. And Stacey, since ReShonda mentioned you, and I was going to mention that too, that is wonderful to have the credit counseling. What would be your last sentence of what next steps for us?
I think access to capital is huge. And so, what we're trying to take our team members is, if you say a no, you say, how can you make it a yes? And so our retail team is doing a really great job on that. And we are getting people coming back in, following the steps we've suggested, and then we are able to give them the loans. And so how do we just continue that and get that, not just with one or two people, but with our whole community? And 24/7 has gotten the financials together, and we are working, and we do need to keep doing that, because it's not a matter of if my bank wins or someone else's bank wins. This is a community issue, and we all need to be together on that. So I agree, and I know that Robert's gotten us together a few times, and we need to just keep going forward on how do we do that.
I love that. I absolutely love that. And Robert, since you're the last person and Stacey mentioned you, what would you be? What's our next step, or what's the next vision you have?
I think there are a number of good initiatives going on. I think we just have to continue the communication. And I think we have to make sure we're leading people to the people who's ready to help. I think that's the key. I think, not everybody is ready. Not every business is ready. I think we have to make sure we put people in the right spaces early on so that they have the right nurturing that needs to take place. And I think if we do that, I know if I, and I don't bother Stacey a lot, but I know if I send somebody to Stacey or send somebody to a few other people, they come back, whether they're successful or not, they come back appreciated. And so I think we got to really make sure when we send people to people, we don't send them to them just because it's something good for us. We have to send people to somebody because it's good for them.
I love that, Robert. I so agree. Barb Grant is actually in the chat room, and she mentioned that years ago, a group of leaders agreed to participate in the Waterloo Housing Partnership and committed money towards home loans for down payment assistance. Couldn't we replicate something like that for business startups and expansion? And we are having conversations from a 24/7 standpoint about how we can do some things like that and invest in ReShonda's program and more. But I do think there might even be place for beyond that with Cary, and that's why we're very connected with Grove Cedar Valley as well, for other individuals that are looking for that as well. So that's a great conversation to have. I would love for us to definitely have some follow-up on some of these ideas and keep things moving forward. I want to wrap up and thank you all for joining us tonight. This was, the hour went so quick, and I knew it was. I had more questions, but you guys were given, I mean, just such great information and such great insight. And I want to thank you for being vulnerable and open and transparent about your journey, everyone, and sharing stories. I think that connected so well with the audience. And I also want to make sure we thank Mayor Hart, because this was his concept. It's so funny. We were kind of thinking of something else, and having these very deep conversations was Mayor Hart's idea, and it really, really has come together very, very well. So if you see him, just say, Mayor Hart, kudos to you. This whole week of inspiration and setting the tone about how we're going to move together forward as a community came from Mayor Hart, and I think it's going really, really well. So awesome. And tomorrow we actually are talking about vibrant communities. So I would love for my panelists tonight to come back and join us tomorrow. If you're attending out there, definitely you can join us tomorrow as well. We were planning to go Facebook Live, but there's been some issues with technology. So what'll happen is we'll get the video and then we'll upload it. So like last night's video will get uploaded today. This will get uploaded tomorrow for us all to share and everything. So I just, again, thank you guys so much. I really, really appreciate it. You all are awesome and rock, and I appreciate it because I probably call on each of you quite a bit. And Stacey, I'm getting to know you, but you've probably seen several. Look at Robert's face. Robert, I'll take that.
I love it when you call me Joy. I love it when I see your name pop up in my email. So you.
Okay, thank you, Cary. I'm glad. See, Robert.
Oh no, hey, you my heart, but man, sometimes I'm like, whoa.
Yeah, so I'm pretty excited, but I knew this was going to be an awesome conversation. So thank you guys all so much, and we're signing off. Everybody have a great night, and talk to you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Joy.
Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Yep.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.